Hey everyone, it's Sherry with a Girl and Her Dog, and I wanted to come on and just give you a little piece of information today for free. My goal this year in 2023 is going to be to provide you with one free workshop each month so that you can hear my thoughts, but not just that, hopefully gain some knowledge, some information, or at least one tip or strategy that can help you design a life that you love to wake up to every day. Now, this month's topic is going to be uploaded onto YouTube on December 29, and it's actually for January. I'm a little bit early, but it's because number one, I've been home for the last couple of weeks because I'm on Christmas vacation from my day job. And number two, I also find that it is important as we start to wrap up the current calendar year and get ready for the next calendar year, we start reflecting and thinking about our goals. And this month's course is goal setting. So I know that you can utilize it very well during this time of the year, but I do want you to consider how this could be something you use any time of the year. For example, as an educator, I do goal setting at the end of the summer as we're getting ready for the upcoming year. And so I've used this process in a lot of different settings, not just for myself personally, but also for schools. I've used this with now my business, and I've actually used this with people. And I've guided people through this process when I've mentored them as well. And then, of course, I'll go into much more detail in my upcoming course or my current course, depending upon when you're watching this, Confident, Courageous, and Clear, Learning to Live Life on Your Own Terms, because 1 month is dedicated to goal setting and really setting your life up to what you want it to be. So having said that, let's go ahead and get started. And I do have a little presentation, so I'll share my screen with you and then we'll get moving. Computer is running a little slow today, so I do apologize. All right, so here we are. Like I said, this workshop is called Goal Setting, and I'm Sherry Dixon. So who does goal setting? Who does this kind of thing anyway? Because I'll be honest with you, I know people who set goals, and I know people who have never set a goal in their entire life. And these are adult people. I have a very wide range of people in my world. And it's very interesting to me how I got on the path of goal setting. Because to be very, very honest, I learned this while I was in high school. Of course, I've perfected it over the years, but as a high school student, that's when I realized that I wanted to go to college and I wanted to start a career in the education field and I wanted to build a big life. That's what I knew. I didn't know where or when that big life was going to happen, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And so I set myself some goals with the help of my guidance counselors at my high school. And I remember the first time I did that in the 9th grade because it was something so new to me. However, something I've kind of had done in my head all the time. Like I always knew that during that school year, I was going to accomplish such and such, or over the summer, I wanted to make sure I could do this or that. And I think that started pretty early with me. But again, I'm kind of a high achiever. And so it just kind of makes sense with my personality. However, I remember going through this process and just thinking, wow, there's so much for me to do. But my guidance counselor was so good about making sure that we knew, and I guess because we were teenagers, I'm not really sure, but she was real good about really guiding us to set milestones and set doable action steps so that once we accomplished certain things, we could celebrate the progress that we were making, not just about getting to the end goal. Now, school was pretty easy for me. So, of course, I was in the higher level classes back in the day. Of course, I'm old, but back in the day, they weren't called what they are now, but they were the honors class or the high level or whatever they chose to call them that year. And it really was important for us to stay very, very organized. We had our agendas. And then again, when we set those goals for ourselves, we kept those milestones in our agendas, and we set that goal and put it, at the end of the school year, so that we always had that in front of us. It was always visible to us. And so I do think that my high school time really did a good job of setting me up for success when it comes to goal setting, which I think really paved the way for me, because once I got out of high school and I started college, I kind of knew where I was going for the first year, and I was able to set those goals and milestones again on my own that first year. But then I ran into that block of time where I had to pivot, and I became a teenage mother. Now, again, I was out of high school, so it was a little bit easier for me, but still it was difficult because I was in college full time and I was needing to work full time. And now I was being a mom full time. And boy, did I really learn the importance of goal setting and organization and really knowing what I was going after, because I think that for myself, it kind of gave me a why. It gave me a purpose to keep going. And it motivated me, and it really kept me on track. And so even when things were hard and I had to do some pivoting, I knew that I wasn't just going to give up. I just knew that I would just change the plan a little bit. And that came from learning how to goal set, and then learning about life as an adult and getting to that point where I had to juggle so many things, as I mentioned, going into motherhood, that it really did help me design those plans very, very well. So I have to say that it contributed to me getting through college and doing a great job and doing well and getting a job in the field of education. And then, of course, as educators, we definitely have to know how to set goals. We have to know how to set goals, but also know how to teach our students how to set goals. So my first teaching job was in Texas, and we have a different accountability system, or at least it was different then. I think everybody has it, something similar now, but at that point in time, I needed to get my students to understand, hey, you've got to take this test and we've got to get you here. And this is where you are now. And so how are we going to get there? And the best way to do that is goal setting. And so I taught my students, and I was a fourth grade, a third grade, and a fifth grade teacher. And my students knew how to do goal setting. Of course, it wasn't as involved as what I did as an adult, but it was, something that was attainable and doable for those students depending on their age. And so as I started teaching it to my students, and I started refining the skill for myself, knowing that if I needed to do this with my students and then I needed to get them there, what was I going to do along the way? So what were my action steps going to be? So that continued on as I was a classroom teacher. And then as I went into school administration, we do goal setting all the time. And here in Texas, we write something called a campus improvement plan. And the campus improvement plan really is our goals, our objectives, and our action steps for the year that will drive everything that we do on the campus. And these are so important. They get turned into the state and they have to attach to our budgets. And you can see that they're pretty detailed and pretty involved. And so I tell you all of that because it really does make you learn how to go through the process so much more efficient and so very succinct. So what I did is I took over, I've been the principal at 3 different schools, and I tend to take on schools that have challenges and need some kind of, I don't want to say the word fixing, but some kind of adjustments, some kind of work done with them. And you really have to be very intentional about what you do. Now, one thing I do have to say that I discovered this week, and it's a whole different story, but I discovered that I don't know if I'd been as purposeful and intentional in my own side business yet. And I think it's because I've been overwhelmed with the learning process and everything else. But in my day job of being a principal, I know I'm very sufficient, and I know I'm very organized, and I know that I'm very detailed when it comes to knowing how to set goals. And then it's not just about knowing how to set goals, but knowing how to set goals that are attainable and doable. And sometimes you get a lot of young teachers on your staff, and sometimes they want to shoot for the moon, and that's always fun and exciting and very motivating at the moment. But then, are those always doable and attainable goals? So I tell you all of that just to kind of get us started so we can get a frame of mind where we are in this whole goal setting process for everybody in the world, because I think everybody is on a different place along that continuum of how detailed you are, or even if you do or do not set goals every year. So what happens? Why do, or who sets goals? What kind of person really needs these goals? Well, this is the type of person that knows that goals can trigger new behaviors. Now, they don't guarantee new behaviors, but they can trigger new behaviors. I was in a training today and the person said, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And that's such a profound thought, because if you think about the world, if we just stay the same, it's going to stay the same. And we know that that's not possible, and that's not even reality. And so goal setting or determining a goal really puts us on a path of thinking, I can change this behavior. And it's not good or bad behaviors that you're changing, it's just behaviors in general. It also kind of keeps you aligned to your focus and basically keeps you focused. So I know with myself, I put my goals in very strategic places and I'm going to see them often. It's not going to be a one and done. I have a notebook right now that you'll see an example of, but I can show you my goals are written here and they're very detailed there. But then I also have a page throughout my paper planner where they are on sticky notes and they're stuck in there so I can randomly see those. Plus, I always know that I have them located somewhere on my computer where I'm going to see it almost daily. And so I think that's one of the important things. And even at the school, I try to do the same thing with a newsletter or different opportunities that I have to work with the teachers. We want to remind ourselves what we're shooting for, what we're trying to get to as the end result, because it keeps us focused. It also promotes a sense of self-mastery and sometimes self-worth. So I know that there have been years where I haven't been too excited about setting goals. I was teaching fifth grade one year, and personally, I was having a very difficult year. My daughter was having a difficult year. She had a teacher that she loved, but she was just starting to go through some changes in her life. And then my marriage was kind of a little bit rocky that year. And so all of those things, plus I didn't really enjoy fifth grade as much as I thought I was going to. I didn't, it was a tough year for me. And so I didn't set goals like I typically do, not as detailed, not as in depth, not as big. If I did have a goal, it was just like a minor goal, like just so I could say I had a goal. And I can really say that it hit my self-worth. It made me feel like, oh, I don't believe in myself enough. And it kind of compounded everything else that was going on. And so it does really promote a sense of that self-mastery, and really does make us realize that we're the only one in charge of accomplishing our goal. And so that makes us worthy of something. It also motivates us. How excited are we? And I always go back to this example of New Year's resolutions. When we set a New Year's resolution, and I think about the gym. So I belong to a gym, and when I go to gym class, because I like to go to group fitness classes sometimes, when I go, I can always know that I'm going to go so many minutes ahead of the class starting so I can get my equipment ready. And I'm basically going to find a spot in the class. But I always know beginning on January 2nd, that's not going to be the case. And it's going to last for about 3 or 4 weeks. And we joke about it, you know, in circles that I go in, but it's true. It's because we're super motivated. Lots of people set those goals of, I'm going to get healthy this year. I'm going to lose weight this year. And they have this thought of, that means I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to go to the gym all the time. Well, unfortunately, sometimes they set the goals either too big or without a good action plan, and then those goals fizzle out. But they do motivate us. And so I do think it's important for us to talk about that, because later on in the presentation, you'll see that we talk about ways that we can sustain those goals and those action plans so that we can stay motivated. And then it gives us something to look forward to. So I'm on a bunch of groups on social media, and I will say right now, it's very hard for me not to respond to some people. in some groups that are saying, like, woe is me, this is the worst time of the year, this is the worst year of my life, et cetera, et cetera. And I always keep thinking, if they just had something they were working toward, if they just believed that they could accomplish this, then would that give them a different narrative? Would that cause them to think differently, talk differently, act differently, and feel differently? And I definitely think it would. And so I do think that the person that does sit down and sets the goals really has a great opportunity for all of these great things on the screen here to happen in their lives. And with the right backup plans and the right supports, I know that those things can also be sustainable. So I talked to you a little bit about my goal setting process, but it really did help me on my journey to leadership. I really do have to say that. And as I'm working through my business experience, which I mentioned before, and I'll elaborate a little bit, I will say that reflection is a very big part of my process. And I'm going to go through my process with you in just a little bit, but I always start with reflection. And that's not always been the case. I think at first, especially high school, college, and maybe my young adult years, I would say, okay, I'm going to accomplish this, this, and this year. This is how I'm going to do it. These are the places I'll celebrate along the way. And then the end of the year came and I would say, yep, I made that goal, or nope, I didn't accomplish that goal. And typically I accomplished most of my goals. But again, sometimes it might have been because they were just smaller than what they needed to be, or because I just had a good plan in place. But as I've gotten a little bit older and I think about my life, because I've taken more chances, I know that as a young adult, and I want to say even probably up until I was about 45, 43 years old, I don't know if I did a lot of risky types of things. I think I lived my life very comfortable. Yes, I worked hard so that I could be promoted in my career. And I always wanted to be a good mom and learn new things about being a supportive mom, especially as my daughter grew, because you use different skills when they're toddlers compared to school age, compared to teenagers, and then young adults. And so it just made me really think about I've had so many experiences, and now that I'm being a little more risky, I think I need to add reflection into my goal setting process. And when I started to do that, I think it helped me become better at knowing myself. Because as I'll talk, when I do my reflections, I really do think about my wins and my challenges, and then what caused each of them and what did I learn from them. And so it is a process, but I do think that it made my goal setting experiences much more valuable. It made my goals much more attainable, and it has made me just a better leader in my career, all the way around. I've done some goal setting with my daughter as well now that she's in her 30s, and I think she's learned how to set some goals pretty well also. And so that always, makes me know that this is something that's not just internal for myself, but then I can apply it by teaching it to others. All right. So, of course, I love a good low quote. And this one is our little inspiration for today. And that is, a goal without a plan is just a wish. And that happens so many times, y'all. I cannot tell you how many people I know, not only do they not set goals, but some people set goals and then that's it. They just set the goal. For example, these people that make New Year's resolutions. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to just go to the gym every single day. Well, that's kind of well, a list of things to do. I don't know if it's a plan, because I don't know if the plan is the appropriate plan. So I do think that your biggest predictor of success with your goals is whether or not you have a good action plan and you have a good way to sustain the action plan and make the pivots if you need to, as you progress through your year, your month, or your whatever period of time that you are indicating that you'll accomplish your goal. So before we actually get into the process, I do want to talk about some fundamentals that I very, very much believe in. So some common mistakes that I really say you need to avoid, and these are hard because again, when we goal set, we get this sense of self-worth and this motivation, and it triggers a deeper focus and a need to change behaviors. And it gives us that sense of my life could be this. And that's what goal setting really is supposed to do. But sometimes it can be almost a little bit too fantasy if we commit these mistakes or make these mistakes. And so I think one of them is thinking too small. As I mentioned, I know I've had years where I've made goals that I know are too small. And I say that because I say to my clients, I say on my podcast, I say in my blog, I played small for many, many years because I felt like I needed to fit into that mold or that box of what other people's expectations were for me. And when you're playing small, of course, you're not going to set super big goals because that would not be playing small. But then on the flip side, you can't also set goals that are too big. Now, there's a fine line, and this is the very hardest part of goal setting because you don't want to be too small, but you can't be too big. And then where is the middle gray area? That is not, I don't believe there's a formula for that. I don't know if I can tell you where that is or your best friend can tell you that. You have to feel that yourself. You have to know yourself well enough. And that's why I like the reflection piece because it does help you really see where are you and what things have you been able to accomplish so that you can find that gray area and you can set appropriate goals. I also see people make the mistake of setting very vague goals. I'm going to lose weight. We mentioned that on the last couple of slides. Great. That is a great goal. I believe in that. I actually have that as a goal for myself this year. Well, an action step for myself. It's not one of my goals, but I think it's a great goal for many, many people. However, it doesn't really give us a lot of detail. It's very vague. And so I think that that is something that we do need to consider when we are setting our goals. We don't want to set goals that we're not confident in. So, just to give you an example, and this sounds really silly, but there was a period of my life where I was very, very shy as a child. And as I grew up and graduated college and made the transition to Houston, and I started this new life here, I committed to myself that I was no longer going to be that shy girl that just kind of stayed in the corner and stayed uninvolved in things. I wanted to start living my dreams and I wanted to start building a life that I loved. And so, even though I still played small, I didn't want to play that small, if that makes sense. So as we started moving through goal setting and different things, I remember a year where I know I set my goals based on what my friends did. We were all teachers together. We were all transplants from other states. So we kind of became like family. And because I wanted to be popular or because I wanted to fit in, which sounds so silly now as I look back on it, but it was my reality, I was setting goals that such and such set. And they might have been too big for me. They might have been goals that didn't even motivate me. They might have been goals that were not even aligned to my lifestyle because I was the only one that had a child in our core group of friends. And so, everybody's life is different. So you need to be confident in the goals that you set. You need to know that these are goals that are going to get you where you want to go, not your friend. And you also need to know that it's something you want to accomplish. I will say that there was a year that I woke up and I said, I'm going to run the Houston Half Marathon next year. And my ex-husband said, why would you want to do that? And I said, because I've always loved running. And we were actually lying in bed that morning watching it 1 year prior. And I said, and look at these people when they cross the finish line. What a sense of accomplishment. I said, I know it will be a lot of work, especially because I was already a principal at the time because of my work schedule. But I said, it's something that I want to be able to accomplish. It's a goal that I have for myself. And so I sat down that day, that very day, and I wrote that goal and I set my actions. And later that evening, he came to me and he said, okay, I'll run it too. And I said, well, okay, great. But then we got to a point about mid-year through the calendar year, and he wasn't running anymore. And we had to have a conversation. And I remember us talking about that was my goal, not his goal, but he felt the need to have that goal because I had that goal. And he felt the need that because one person in the household would be training, then everybody needed to be training. And I think that he just felt like he wanted that sense of motivation as well, or self-worth that I was feeling that day, but he wasn't running. So he wasn't confident that he could even accomplish that goal. Now, later, a couple years later, he did make that a goal and he did complete and outran me and does a great job with them. However, it had to be the right time for him as well. Also, you know, you also have to know exactly what you want. And that kind of aligns with what we've been saying. If you don't know what you want from life, how can you set a goal? You can't. If you don't know where you want to be in a year or in 6 months or whatever your timeline is, you can't set a goal. And that's again why I bring that reflection piece in, because I do think it really helps for people to consider the things that they've already accomplished, and then it kind of gets them on a path of knowing where they want to go. But if you're stuck in life, which you could be, and I can help with that, but if you're stuck in life and you don't know, then it would be a daunting task to even sit down and start setting goals. And I think when we were back on the page about talking about, I know people who don't set goals, I think that's really why, is because it's a daunting task if you don't know what you want out of life. So you have to know yourself. And then, of course, a common mistake is setting the goal and then just not committing to it. And that happens as well. So I say try this instead. Set attainable, doable goals. Set actions that you can actually accomplish. They work with your work schedule, they work with your life schedule. They are things that you can actually commit to. Set goals that will push you out of your comfort zone. So again, not too small, not too big, but in that gray area, but they push you a little bit, because if nothing changes, right? And so you don't want to just sit and be complacent with where you are if you are wanting to move forward. And then I think one of the most important things about goal setting and action planning is that you set milestones for celebrating small wins. And I think I want to say probably that's one of the most important things, because how do you keep the grit? How do you sustain when you're over a long period of time, say a year-long goal, or a goal that's a little harder than where you are right now? It's pushing you out of that comfort zone. When things get hard, our bodies naturally want to shut down. Our brain is the first thing that will tell us, no, this is hard. Go back to bed. It happens. No, this is hard. Just eat the cake one time. It happens. So I think that you do have to be able to celebrate. And I talked about this a little bit in the Gift of Alignment talk that I did with some other authors from our Unleash Her book, when I talked about stepping out of your comfort zone, that you have to celebrate. And sometimes the celebrations can be big, of course, but sometimes they just need to be little ones. Just maybe, hey girl, look what you did today. I'm so proud of you. Keep it up. For me, sometimes that works. Sometimes I need a little more motivation, but sometimes celebrating those small wins with just a little self-talk does the work, does the job. So here's my goal setting process, and it sounds kind of big, and it is. It takes time. It takes about 2 weeks to process through my goal setting. And I would have to say that this is probably how long it takes me at the school as well, because I use this same kind of process, a little adjusted, but basically the same steps when I'm setting goals for the campus at school as I do setting goals for my own personal life and now in my business life. So the first thing that I always do is I reflect on my current reality. And this is where I really have to dig deep. And this can be really fun and it can be very hard. So the first day, what I do is I always want to start with a positive. And so I reflect on all of my wins. What were my wins for the year? And I did this last week. And I just take a piece of paper and I just write them all down. And they can be big or they can be small. It doesn't really matter. They're wins. If they're wins for me, then they're wins for me. And so I just write them all down. And I leave myself space because I might have to leave it for a while and process a little more and be able to come back to it. So it might take a day, it might take 2 days. It just depends on the year. This year has been a very interesting year for me. I have had so many wins that it took me a little bit of time. And I really wanted to do a good job because next year in 2023, I guess in just a couple of days, I am really going to be stepping out of my comfort zone. And I wanted to make sure that I had a solid plan for doing that. So then my next step on that reflection is that I look at all the challenges. And this is where the hard part comes in because I have to look at what didn't go the way I wanted it to go or what just didn't make me feel so good about life. And I have to think back and I try to do it, especially when it's a yearly process, month by month. And so I use a few different resources as well. I go back and I look at my social media. I go back and I look at text messages. I go back and I look at my calendar. I just really think about everything that had happened to me in my time during that time period that I'm reflecting on, because I want to make sure that I'm really getting the best picture of where I am currently when it comes to working through this reflection process. And then what I do is I kind of sit with these types of things for a little while, because the next thing I always have to do is once I get them organized and categorized, and I just use a plain T chart, it's really simple. But then I have to think about what did I learn from each of these things? And I have to think about, was it something that I want to continue to do? And is it something, or is it something that I want to stop doing in my life? So, for example, a win that I had was I was able to co-author in the book Unleash Her. That's a huge win. That's been a dream of mine ever since I was a kid to write a book. Now I only have a chapter, but I'm still a co-author and it's international bestseller. That's big. That was a win. What did I learn from that? It was a big learning curve. I had to step out of my comfort zone. It wasn't that I went and sought out this book deal. It actually came to me in a roundabout way. And I don't know if I was 100% prepared for it, but I had to really focus on the writing process, which I teach children the writing process all the time. However, when you're actually doing it yourself as an adult, you kind of have to step back and you have to think about all those steps and all those ways to do that and what works and what doesn't work for you in your adult brain. I had to be comfortable enough with my story that I was able to put it out into the world. And you have to be pretty confident with yourself to be able to do that. And then I had to learn the other ins and outs, the editing process, the launching process, the selling process, all the things that go with being an author and being part of a book deal. And it was a big learning experience for me. It was an awesome experience. I learned so much from it, but it was an experience. Now, on the flip side, one of my challenges is that I thought I was going to go into business at the end of May, and I was going to end the year at a certain salary from my business. And I did not even get close, not even close. I can't even say that the percentage really made a dent in what my goal was. What did that teach me? It taught me, number one, I was not doing what I needed to do to sell. I can promise you that. And number two, I thought I was going to go in it being successful from day one, even when there was so much that I had to learn, which is not really reality. There are always exceptions to that rule, but even as a teacher, I was a great student teacher. I've always taught in the neighborhood as a kid and Sunday school when I was in college and those types of things. I've always been a coach, all those things, but I still had a learning curve and I wasn't great my first year of teaching. So I say all that to say I learned that number one, I had to focus a little different on selling. Number two, I had to learn good selling. And number three, I had to realize some patience and give myself some grace to try things before I was completely ready and maybe possibly fail a little bit before I got to success. So those are just two examples of how that reflection process really helped me be able to get to a point of moving on to the next step, which is create your vision board. Now, I have an example on my vision board, and I make vision boards pretty simple. Now, it just depends on what area of my life I'm looking at. When I was building my house and I was designing and I was decorating it, my vision board was insane. It was so detailed and it was so ready because it had to be. But as I'm setting these goals, I kind of focused on 4 areas for this year. So my vision board just really basically looks at 4 areas. Now I'm actually going to a workshop in January here in Houston on vision boarding. And I used to be a scrapbooker way back in the day. Remember, I'm pretty old. So I do like those pleasant and pleasing aesthetics when it comes to my work and those types of things. But for my purpose this year, the vision board wasn't the most important piece. Now, what will it do for me? I will have it in a space where I can look at it and it will keep me motivated. It will keep me on track and keep me remembering why I'm doing all that I'm doing. So once I did all of that, then I took all of those documents, I kind of laid them out on my desk and I did a brain dump, is what I call it, but you can call it a brainstorming session. And I just wrote down everything I wanted to accomplish in 2023. It took me some time. And there's a lot of things and it's messy. And you're going to see an example of one of the pages of my brain dump and how I kind of do it because I'll start and it's kind of organized. And then I start adding things in. And then you see some sticky notes. And it's just, it's just me getting my thoughts down. And I am very ADHD. So I'm random sometimes. And I know that. And knowing that, that's why I use all of those different tools to be able to do that. But once I complete that brainstorming session, and again, I give myself some time and I do give myself a little break. So I'll start and then I step away. And then I go back and then I start categorizing what ones fit together. And you'll see why I do this here in just a minute, but it's really important to do that. And then I have to determine, did some things overlap? So I might say, I'm going to, I don't know, I'm going to get healthy and I'm going to lose 10 pounds. Those might overlap a little bit. So again, I just kind of categorize them, kind of work through that process. And then I start to begin thinking in the aspect of which of these are actually goals and which of these are actually action steps. Because some things are just like, I'm going to run 20 miles a week every week. Okay, well, that's an action. That's not a goal. The goal is I'm going to run the Houston Half Marathon in January of 2024 with a time that aligns with my best time I've had before. So that's the goal. So you see how there's a little bit of a difference there. Then I create, I remind myself that I need to create no more goals than I can handle. And because this is a year-long process, then I'm not going to have more than 4 or 5. And I actually chose 4 for this year. And I have them in 4 different categories. Now, if this were a month or 6 weeks, or maybe like if it were back to the school, a semester, I'm going to want to, lower that number. But even right now on my campus improvement plan for my school, I have 5 goals. That's it. We have 5 goals. We have objectives and we have action steps, but we have 5 goals and that's all. So you do want to make sure that even though your goals are attainable and doable, if you have 75 goals, you're never going to accomplish all of those. So you really need to think that through. And that's why I think categorizing, doing that brainstorming and putting things together really helps with kind of being able to determine that. Then I sit down and I actually set the goals. And these are goals that are going to be measurable, attainable, doable, and have a timeline to accomplish. So I set those milestones. And once I get into the details after, I'll show you an example. And I did not get the picture of that, but I can show it on to you on the screen, hold it up. I actually really sit down and set out my action steps really, really detailed. So I think that that is something that is super important as well. But I want to make sure that it's measurable. There's some way for me to know if I accomplished the goal or not, that it's attainable, as we talked about before, that it's not something too big. It's doable. So if my goal were to learn to ski, I live in Houston, Texas. I don't have a lot of travel time right now because I'm running a school and I'm starting a side business and I'm going to be running physical running more so that I can prepare for the marathon coming up. Would I really have time to go travel somewhere that I could ski and be able to really do it to where I would really learn it? Probably not. That wouldn't be doable. Then I'm going to set my actions that will get me to accomplish each goal. And again, I have those because for the most part, they came out in the brainstorming session. And so I just need to kind of categorize them, edit them a little bit, organize them a little bit. I might add to them as well, because after I start to process everything and start moving it around and start thinking it through, new things might come into my mind. Now, the great thing about the action steps is that I know the way I've designed them, I have these milestones. So that's the next step. I determine my milestones so I know I can celebrate my progress. And I also know I can pivot if I need to. So let's just say I go back to that goal of running the Houston Half Marathon in January, and I get to June and I've not run one single day since June. I'm going to need to adjust that goal a little bit. Does that mean I can't run that half marathon? It's 13 miles. No, I'd still have 6 months to train, but it might mean that it's not going to be my PR. It might mean that some things along the action steps have to change because now I have a shorter timeline, if you get what I'm saying. So just know I did not put that as part of this process because I don't want to be a negative Nancy here. Sorry if you are a Nancy, but I do want you to know that these are your goals. These are your actions. These are your celebrations, your milestones. You are in charge of this. You are the only one that has control in accomplishing them. So then you are the only one that has control in adjusting them. And you can give yourself that grace to be able to do that. And then once they're all together and they're written out and they're ready to go and I feel good about them, then I have to sit down with myself first and I have to commit to the goals and the actions. I have to, because if I can't commit to them, they're not going to get done. And then this is something I do. I make them public. I share them with people that are closest to me. And I might even start sharing them this year on social media just because they're big for me and my world is now online. So it's a little bit different, but regardless, you need to share them with somebody. Here's why. Number one, once you say them out of the words out of your mouth, it makes them real. And that's important. And then number two, I think also it gives you something to be accountable for. So if I set all of these goals and I stay in my house and I don't talk to anybody for the entire year and I don't share anything and I don't do anything to accomplish the goals or not to accomplish the goals, does it matter? It would matter to me. I am a self starter. I am a self motivator and I am a very high achiever. So for me, it'll matter. But I know my personality is different than other people's personalities. Not better, not worse, just different. And so for some people, it might not matter. And then they don't become important. And then they're not real. And then are they a priority? So something to think about. I think it's important to make it public to somebody. You don't have to put it on the news. You don't have to put it in the newspaper, and you definitely don't have to put it on social media. However, even just by telling one person, it gives that one person an opportunity later on to say, hey, Sherry, how's that goal going? How's your running going? Are you on track? How's it going? What are you doing? You never know. It could make a huge difference in what you do in life. So some examples of the things that I've been working on. So this first one is the example. Like I said, it's pretty simple. But again, I'm taking a class a little bit later, but you can see I've kind of organized how I'm going to be working on my year. But this is my vision board. So I know I have a goal for financial freedom, and it's not financial freedom in particular, but you get the idea. Working on my business, working on self-improvement, which includes marathon running, and there's a previous finishing medal and my little bib and that kind of thing. And then I also put in there, it's not a goal, but it's something I really need to keep at the forefront for myself, because I don't do this. I'm going to plan a trip. I don't know when, I don't know where, but I am going to plan a trip this year in 2023. And if I don't keep that as a visual for myself, I don't know if I'll attain that, if that makes sense. So that's my vision board. And then I just included some of and I'm a paper kind of girl, so I have everything out on paper. If you'll see on the screen, if you're looking at the screen on your left, that's how I did my wins and my challenges. And so you can kind of look at that, and you can see I probably have some information on there that's a little more detailed than what you really need, but nonetheless, that's on there. And then you can also see how I did my brainstorming, and I did just kind of dumped, and it took more than one page. And like I said, you're going to see this page and then this page that I continued on. And then I started checking things off when I started categorizing them. And then I started putting things, ideas. What if I did this by here? What if I did this by here? What if I did this by here? So these are just all ideas. So they really are not the end result. But here's an example here on the right of my actual goal as an end result. And this is just part of it. But you can see I kind of have notes there. I know what these notes mean for me, but my goal that I have here, and we're going to get into the next page, but it's here. And then you see the word elevate at the top, because what I didn't mention is I'm also a one word kind of person. I'm not a resolution person, but I do like to keep a focus word every year. And this year I kind of have two. Grace is one of them. And you can see it at the top of the brainstorming page, because I'm making so many changes in my life. I want to remind myself to give me grace when I have to pivot. But my one word for this year really definitely is elevate, because that's what I feel I'm doing, is elevating myself to the next level. So here's my goal example. I will impact 50 women with my coaching process and programs by December of 2023. These are my action steps. I'm going to launch my Confident, Courageous, and Clear course in January. I've been talking about it, but it's not officially ready yet. So I've pushed that timeline to January. I'm going to make sales connections, and I have more details on my pages of exactly how I'm going to do it, but I haven't been doing that piece well. And so that's a priority. And you can see it's pretty high on the list of things to do. I'm also going to work on building my social media presence. And again, I have very specific, here's where I'm at, here's where I want to be by these milestones throughout the year. I'm going to build my email list to 1,000. My email list right now is at 19. It's not huge. Now, 1,000 might be too big, but from what I'm learning, once it gets going, it can grow pretty quick. So that's what I'm hoping. But again, this is my plan. I have the grace that I can adjust as needed. I want to build my podcast followers to 100, and I'm sitting right around 20 right now. So I think that's very doable. I want to achieve my master coach certification, and I have a specific timeline on that needs to be done by June. I want to learn and understand and then use effectively SEO. because I still am very confused about that. I don't know why. I think I've got mental blocks or something, but I know I need to use this for my blog, my podcast, and my YouTube. And so it's important. And I know I have to learn it. It's just finding the time right now and finding the focus to be able to do it. I want to participate in 2 more books where I co-author. I'm not ready to do my own book yet, but I do want to co-author 2 additional books this year. I want to speak on 5 stages, either in person or virtual. And I'm already working on 2 right now that are going to be, one is in person, and the other one I haven't determined yet if I'm going to go in person or virtual. But that's a goal for myself. And then I set a goal that I want to start attending 1 networking event per month. I get so busy in my day job and then with the side hustle. And if you were to see my goal for my personal self improvement, I actually also put some action steps for spending more time with my friends as well. I've immersed myself into work over the past 6 months. And because of that, I've neglected those connections. I've done some networking and I've done some outings with my friends, but not consistent. And so that's something I will be working on as well. So that's the end of my presentation. I know that this is on YouTube, so of course there's not an opportunity for you to post questions or ask questions. However, I do want you to know that in the notes, I'll put any way that you can contact me. Please go ahead and give me some feedback, write a review. I would absolutely love that. But I think one of the most important things to remember is that this is your process. You need to make it work for you. I'm giving you my steps, what works for me. Now, I've used it and I promise you it works, but it works for me. And you might not be right where I'm at right now, or you might be just somewhere along the continuum of getting there. And maybe you're just ready to reflect. Maybe you're ready to goal set and action step and you're not ready to reflect. It just depends on you, depends on what you're looking for and what you want to accomplish. But again, I've used this process personally and professionally, and it works. And I'm pretty proud of the work that I've done with goal setting. And so again, if you would like to reach out or need some additional support, of course, I have coaching opportunities, and I will put that link in the notes as well. And what I would like to offer is, even if you just need a place to get started, 1 session complimentary. So I will put that link so that you can do that. And then if you feel like you need some additional support, we can always talk about that later. But right now, this is not about selling you anything. It's about helping you become the best version of you. And by doing that, then I'm having an impact on the world. And so that's my main goal and mission in life. So thank you for joining me. Again, this is Sherry with A Girl and Her Dog Coaching and Consulting, and I will hopefully catch up with you soon.